Tying up a pattern called a clear stretched Caddis Larva. I've got a size 16 hook in the vise, 3/32 bead. I'm going to start this off with some white thread. This is just a 7D denier. I want to do a little bit of tapering on this, and so I want it to build up a little. So I'm going ahead and going a little bit thicker here for me. And then we'll just go ahead and travel back down. To our first tie-in point. So the first material we're going to use is I'm going to use some vinyl ribbing that is clear. So this ribbon it just looks like that, and it's going to be the ribbing going up the fly here. I'm actually going to use my lighter, and what I'm going to do, just so that I get it really skinny down there at the bend of the hook, because I'm going to kind of melt this just a little bit, but then pull on it pretty hard. And what hopefully you can see with the macro lens on here is we get a nice place to tie in, a way to tie in, plus I've actually shrunk that material down quite a bit by pulling and stretching it out. So we'll go ahead and tie this in. Just right here towards the back. Let me pull on that a little bit. Get that locked down good and in place. And I'm going to carry down the shank of the hook here, flattening my thread out a little bit because I really do want to start this one out really quite skinny. And I'll put some pressure in terms of pulling on this a little bit. I'm not going to pull too hard because it'll actually break on you. I didn't believe that until I actually did it pretty easily this morning. So we've got that kind of in place. I may make another trip up and back down because I am working on a taper. We're going to work on a taper here. And one kind of tip, I suppose, when you're tying a fly like this is by using white as an underbody, it's going to make the material kind of pop out a lot more. If I was tying just against the black nickel, that black nickel would just wash out most of the color there. So next I'm just going to tie in a little piece of Mirage opal tinsel, large sized. If you see on this end, I've actually cut it on an angle there just to help us get that tied in as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and introduce that to our hook and kind of catch that one corner on it. And then I'm going to take wraps down to where we're going to have the abdomen on this fly start. And I'm going to take it a ways down into the bend here. I'm just about as far as I want to go right now at this point, but then I'm just going to start working my way back up, and really from here forward we're going to just focus our attention to filling this in and to create that taper that we're looking for, where it's fatter up by the bead and it's skinnier down towards the back. And you just do that by taking these passes back and forth, and each time you may go a little bit less of a distance. And you'll see me from time to time when I tie, and I say this all the time when I'm tying, is that I'll take my vise and I'll turn it sideways. When I do that, it's just for me. It allows me to kind of see, okay, where are we with that taper? How's it looking? Is it what I was looking for? Am I ready to go with my next material, or do I have a little bit more thread work to do here? And here we had a little bit more thread work to do. And we're going to put a dubbing collar on this. So I'm okay that there's a little bit of a gap there behind the thread. and the bead. Any place you see a low place, you're going to want to kind of fill that in just with a couple of extra thread wraps. And when you get done with it, you're going to notice you've got what you're looking for in terms of a nice thin to thick body here. And we're getting really close to where I want to be. Let's take a few wraps there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take that tinsel, the Mirage tinsel, not the berib, but the tinsel that's kind of pearly. Keep in mind that this is mylar, so it's really slippery. And you also want to keep an eye out for the tip of the hook, especially with these first couple of wraps. If you pull this tight enough and run it right across the point of your hook, it's going to just cut right off. So I'm trying to keep these wraps fairly tight as I work my way up. I'm not being lazy today like I usually am and use the rotary feature. I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way. So there you go. We should be all the way up right behind the bead. It'll only take a couple of thread wraps to secure that down. But it will come unraveled, so make sure you keep your tension on it until you actually get this tied down. And when you're happy with where you are, just maybe come on the other side and we'll take another couple of thread wraps here. Okay, with our Mirage on, now we're going to rib the body with the ribbing material we put in at the very beginning that we melted. And I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on this as I take some of these initial wraps. I'll stretch this out a little bit and it'll make the body segments a little bit thinner, and they'll get thicker as we move up the body here. So I'm just going to kind of take my time and work that material up, putting less and less tension on it with each turn. And occasionally it'll have a gap in it, which is okay, because we put a really nice underlayer that would just peek through. May actually improve the look of the fly itself. All right, we're coming in home here. I'm going to only take it about that far, and once again I'm going to take some wraps just to secure that piece of vinyl rib in place. And then I'm going to sneak in again with my scissors. I'm going to stretch this material out a little bit as I make the cut, and I'll just help it suck down inside a little bit. What I'm going to do here is we're going to transition. It's one of those kind of odd flies where you transition. I'm going to transition from white to black just to finish this fly off. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my whip finisher and just put in a 2 or 3 turn whip finish. So I'm just going to come in now with the back end of my whip finisher, which is a thread cutting tool. So now we're disengaged with our white thread, and I'm going to reach over and I'm going to grab my bobbin of black. This is going to be 14-aught. I'm going to start this right behind the bead there, and then I'm going to just take wraps back so it's wrapping over itself, just like you do when you're starting a fly. All we're doing is starting a fly. We're just starting with a different color this time around. I want that to sit right about there, and then I'm going to grab my scissors and we'll go ahead and cut that off, our tag end. So for legs on this, I'm going to actually use a partridge feather, and it's in a sort of a sulfur orange color. I really like the looks of this. So I'm going to prepare this feather just by stripping off some of the fuzzy bottom fibers. So we are kind of left with something that looks just about like that. I'm going to come in very carefully with my scissors now, and I'm going to cut the very center stem off here. So this is also a really good time to wax your thread, just so it's going to grip this a little bit better, but hopefully you can see how our partridge feather has kind of got that V cut out of it. And I'm going to have that V kind of straddle over the top right behind the bead here. And once I get it kind of into position, I'm going to rotate my vise counterclockwise, so that thread's going to want to jump back against my fingers here. I'm going to take a kind of a loose wrap over the top. I'm going to bring it back straight up, and I'm going to pull tight, pulling straight back up. And that helps to keep those legs on either side. So hopefully you can see how we do have legs on either side. I still have the stem of the feather on. And that's going to allow me to kind of just use that stem to pull backwards and shorten these legs up a little bit. Not a lot, but I'm going to shorten them up at least a little bit here. Just like that. And I want to make sure I keep those clumps on either side. And with those in place, we're going to go ahead and we'll just take some other wraps here, both in front of, behind. Then I'm going to come in with my scissors and we'll go ahead and cut the bottom part, the stem portion of this partridge feather out. So we've got those legs on either side, exactly where we want them. We're going to finish up with some black hare's ear dubbing. That's going to be that collar that I think I promised at the very beginning of the video, but we're now at that point. We're going to go ahead and get a little bit of extra thread here. I'm going to lick my fingers a little bit so I can dub this onto my piece of thread. Stretch that out a little bit. And I'm not worried about this getting really tight. We're using hare's ear, a hair on purpose because we like the bugginess that it has. It always has those guard hairs in it that just kind of give that extra little bit to your fly pattern. And that's probably going to be good enough, so I'm going to go ahead and pick some of that off. We'll trim some of it off. I'm going to go ahead and take a few turns behind the bead without any dubbing on. And then from there I can just go ahead and we're going to grab our whip finisher. And these whip finished turns of our thread should sink right in behind the bead there, deep down into that dubbing that we just put in place. So with that, I'm just going to turn again my thread kind of sideways so I can cut it with the end of this whip finishing tool. And we're disconnected. And there it is. A wonderful pattern. It's really fun to tie. I haven't actually fished it. I'm going to be fishing it for sure and giving it a shot. But why don't you throw a hook in your vise and give this one a go.